Summary Overview, Chapter 11, Sighting of the Treasure Pagoda, Section 1, Paragraphs 1 to 4. The Treasure Pagoda, being suspended in the air, emerges in front of Shakyamuni Buddha. A voice issues from the pagoda praising Shakyamuni Buddha for expounding the Lotus Sutra. At that moment, a treasure pagoda of the 7 jewels emerged in front of the Buddha. 500 yojana in height and 250 yojana in width and depth, the pagoda sprang out of the earth and was suspended in the air. The pagoda was splendidly decorated with a galaxy of precious treasures such as 500 railings, thousands of millions of chambers, innumerable streamers and banners, cascading jeweled necklaces, and millions of billions of hanging jeweled bells. In all 4 directions, a waft of Tamalapatra and sandalwood fragrance permeated the entire world. The banners and canopies were made of 7 treasures: gold, silver, lapis lazuli, seashell, agate, pearl, and ruby, and they were as high as the heavenly palaces of the 4 heavenly kings. 33 gods rained down celestial mandarava flowers so as to give offerings to the treasure pagoda. As many as thousands of millions of billions of living beings such as heavenly gods, dragons, yakshas, gandharvas, asuras, garudas, kimnaras, maharagas, humans, and non-human beings reverently worshipped the treasure pagoda by offering a potpourri of flowers, incense, necklaces, banners, canopies, music, respect, and praises. Meanwhile, in the midst of the treasure pagoda, a thundering voice resounded, "Excellent, excellent! O Shakyamuni Bhagavath! With great wisdom and equality, you expound to the great assembly the Lotus Sutra, the Dharma to guide bodhisattvas, the Dharma protected and mindfully guarded by Buddhas. O Shakyamuni Bhagavath! Indeed, indeed! It is as you say, as you say. All that you teach is nothing but the truth." Thereafter, when the 4 groups of people witnessed the colossal treasure pagoda being suspended in the air and heard the voice issuing from the pagoda, all of them experienced joy from the Dharma. Marveling at the unprecedented event, they rose from their seats, greeted the Buddha by pressing their palms together in reverence, and then withdrew to one side. Summary Overview, Chapter 11, Sighting of the Treasure Pagoda, Section 2, Paragraphs 1 to 26. Bodhisattva Great Joy of Preaching asks the Buddha to explain why the treasure pagoda has emerged from the earth and to identify the person whose voice has issued from the pagoda. The Buddha replies that the treasure pagoda contains the body of abundant treasures Buddha. The appearance of the treasure pagoda is due to the great vow of abundant treasures Buddha to listen to and praise the Lotus Sutra wherever it is preached. Bodhisattva Great Joy of Preaching asks to view the body of abundant treasures Buddha. In order to do so, Shakyamuni Buddha emits a ray of light from between his eyebrows, gathering his emanated bodies from around the universe and purifying the Buddhalands. When all the emanated Buddhas have gathered, Shakyamuni Buddha opens the treasure pagoda. Abundant treasures Buddha is seen seated on a lion throne in the treasure pagoda. Thereafter, Shakyamuni Buddha is invited by Abundant Treasures Buddha to share half the seat with him. Shakyamuni Buddha then lifts all the attendees up into midair using his divine powers so that they are able to view the body of Abundant Treasures Buddha. Shakyamuni Buddha declares that he will enter parinirvana soon and hence he wishes to entrust the Lotus Sutra to those who can propagate for eternity. He urges anyone who is capable of protecting and spreading the Dharma in the Saha world to come forward and make a great vow. Key messages. Because it is challenging to embrace and spread the Lotus Sutra in the age of evil, a great vow is pivotal to ensure the perpetuity of the Dharma. This is just like what the Abundant Treasures Buddha did when he made a vow to appear whenever the Lotus Sutra was expounded. Therefore, a great vow is the linchpin of success in the propagation of the Dharma. Meanwhile, a bodhisattva mahasattva with the name Great Joy of Preaching perceived doubts in the minds of the heavenly gods, humans, asuras, and the rest. He spoke to the Buddha, "O Bhagavath! What is the reason for the treasure pagoda to emerge from the earth? Why is there a voice coming out from the pagoda?" Then the Buddha replied to Bodhisattva Great Joy of Preaching, "The whole body of a Tathagata is in the treasure pagoda. In the remote past, immeasurable thousands of millions of billions of asamkhya worlds in the east, there was a land called Pristine Treasures, and there lived a Buddha called Abundant Treasures. When this Buddha was practicing the bodhisattva way, he made a great vow as such: if I attain Buddhahood and enter parinirvana, whenever the Lotus Sutra is expounded in any land anywhere in the 10 directions, my memorial pagoda will appear in that spot so as to listen to the sutra, bear testimony to it, and extol it by saying, "Excellent." When that Buddha had completed the Buddha way and before entering parinirvana, he said to the monks in the midst of the great assembly of heavenly gods and humans, "After I have entered parinirvana, anyone who wishes to worship and give offerings to my whole body should build a great pagoda. Throughout the lands in the 10 directions, any place so long as the Lotus Sutra was expounded, that Buddha would use his divine powers and his great vow to manifest the appearance of the treasure pagoda containing his entire body. He would also extol it by saying, 'Excellent, excellent.' O great joy of preaching! Because just now Abundant Treasures Tathagata heard the preaching of the Lotus Sutra, his pagoda emerged from the earth and he extolled it by saying, 'Excellent, excellent.' Thereupon, Bodhisattva Great Joy of Preaching spoke to the Buddha through his divine powers of Tathagata, 'O Bhagavath! We wish to view the body of this Buddha.' The Buddha replied to Bodhisattva Mahasattva Great Joy of Preaching, 'This Abundant Treasures Buddha has taken a profound vow: my pagoda will appear before the Buddha in order to listen to the Lotus Sutra. However, if there is a request for me to show my body to the 4 groups of people, then the Buddha should gather all his emanated Buddhas who are also expounding the Dharma everywhere in the 10 directions at one single spot in order for my body to be visible. O great joy of preaching! Therefore, I must now gather all the emanated Buddhas who are expounding the Dharma in the universe throughout the 10 directions. Great Joy of Preaching said to the Buddha, 'O Bhagavath! We wish to see the emanated Buddhas from the Bhagavath, worship, and give offerings to them.' No sooner than this, the Buddha emitted a ray of light from the tuft of white hair between his eyebrows to illuminate the Buddhas in the eastern land. Instantaneously, 500 trillion Nayuta of Ganges' sands of Buddha lands became visible. The grounds in all these lands were made of crystals, and the lands were gloriously adorned with jeweled trees and jeweled robes. Innumerable thousands of millions of billions of bodhisattvas were present everywhere. All of them were shielded by jeweled curtains draped with jeweled netting. The Buddhas in these lands expounded various doctrines with sonorous and mellifluous voices. Immeasurable thousands of millions of billions of bodhisattvas could be seen everywhere in these lands expounding the Dharma for the multitudes. Wherever the beam of light from the tuft of white hair shone, the same event occurred in the southern, western, and northern regions, the 4 intermediate quarters, and the zenith and the nadir. Meanwhile, the Buddhas in the 10 directions declared to their multitude of bodhisattvas, 'O virtuous men! I must go to the Saha world now, a place where Shakyamuni Buddha is, to worship and give offerings to the treasure pagoda of Abundant Treasures Tathagata.' Instantly, the Saha world was transformed into a place of pristine purity. The ground was made of lapis lazuli and decorated with jeweled trees. Golden ropes were used to demarcate the 8 boundaries. There were no hamlets, villages, towns, cities, oceans, rivers, mountains, streams, or forests. The fragrance of grand jeweled burning incense was wafting in the air, the ground was covered with mandarava flowers, and the jeweled netting curtain was suspended with jeweled bells being spread all over. With the exception of the multitudes in the assembly, all other heavenly gods and humans had been relocated to other lands. Shortly after this, each of the Buddhas who brought along one great bodhisattva as his personal attendant arrived at the Saha world and took a seat under a jeweled tree. Of 500 yojanas in height, the jeweled trees were adorned with branches, leaves, flowers, and fruit in sequential order. Beneath the jeweled trees were the lion thrones, measuring 5 yojanas in height, which were being decorated with enormous jewels. Soon after, all emanated Buddhas sat cross-legged on the thrones. In this way, Trichiliacosm were filled with emanated Buddhas of Shakyamuni Buddha. The emanated Buddhas were still arriving from all directions with no signs of abating. Wishing to provide adequate space for his emanated Buddhas, Shakyamuni Buddha purified the 200 trillion nayuta of lands in the 8 directions so as to ensure an absence of the realms of hell, hungry spirit, beast, or asura. He also relocated all the heavenly gods and humans to another land. The grounds in these lands that he had transformed were also made of lapis lazuli. The lands were adorned with jeweled trees, measuring 500 yojana in height, which were decorated with branches, leaves, flowers, and fruit in sequential order. Beneath the trees were the precious lion thrones ornamented with a galaxy of jewels and of 5 yojana in height. Likewise, there were no great oceans or rivers, or any of the mountains such as Muchalinda Mountain, Mahamuchalinda Mountain, Iron Circle Mountain, Great Iron Circle Mountain, or Mount Sumru in these lands. The kings of mountains were all clustered together to form a single Buddha land. The jeweled grounds were even and smooth, curtains decked with crisscrossing jewels were spread above, banners and canopies were hung, grand jeweled incense was burnt, and precious celestial flowers were showered across the ground everywhere. Wishing to ensure sufficient seats for the arriving Buddhas, Shakyamuni Buddha once again transformed and purified 200 trillion nayuta of lands in the 8 directions so as to ensure an absence of the realms of hell, hungry spirit, beast, or asura. He also relocated all heavenly gods and humans to another land. The grounds in these transformed lands were also made of lapis lazuli. The lands were adorned with jeweled trees, measuring 500 yojana in height, which were decorated with branches, leaves, flowers, and fruit in sequential order. Beneath the trees were the precious lion thrones ornamented with a galaxy of jewels and of 5 yojana in height. Likewise, there were no great oceans or rivers, or any of the mountains such as Muchalinda Mountain, Mahamuchalinda Mountain, Iron Circle Mountain, Great Iron Circle Mountain, or Mount Sumru in these lands. The kings of mountains were all clustered together to form a single Buddha land. The jeweled grounds were even and smooth, curtains decked with crisscrossing jewels were spread above, banners and canopies were hung, grand jeweled incense was burnt, and precious celestial flowers were showered across the ground everywhere. Meanwhile, Shakyamuni Buddha's emanated Buddhas, who expounded the Dharma in the hundreds of thousands of millions of billions of nayuta of Ganges' sands of the eastern lands, had gathered. In the same way, the Buddhas from the 10 directions gradually assembled there and seated themselves in the 8 directions. Shortly thereafter, all the directions were fully occupied with Buddhas Tathagatas from 400 trillion nayuta of lands. Thereafter, the Buddhas who were seated on the lion thrones under the jeweled trees sent their personal attendants to greet Shakyamuni Buddha. Presenting their personal attendants and a handful of precious jeweled flowers, these Buddhas said, "O virtuous men! Go and visit Eagle Peak, the abode of Shakyamuni Buddha, and speak to him as such. How is your health? We wish you less illnesses and less worries, most important of all, a strong body as well as a mind of peace and joy. How are the rest of the bodhisattvas and shravakas? Are they well and virtuous? Following this, give offerings by showering precious jeweled flowers all over the Buddha, saying, such and such a Buddha wishes to participate in the opening of the Treasure Pagoda." All the Buddhas gave the same instructions to their personal attendants. Seeing that his emanated Buddhas had assembled and were seated on the lion thrones, and also having received well wishes from the Buddhas expressing their interests to participate in the opening of the Treasure Pagoda, Shakyamuni Buddha rose from his seat at once and ascended into the air. All the 4 groups of people rose and pressed their palms together, gazing at the Buddha with a focused mind. Then Shakyamuni Buddha opened the door of the Treasure Pagoda of the 7 jewels using the fingers of his right hand. When it was opened, a loud thundering sound issued forth, a sound resembling that of a crossbar being removed from a great city gate. At that instant, all the attendees in the assembly caught sight of the whole body of abundant treasures Tathagata engaged in meditation on a lion throne inside the Treasure Pagoda. The next moment, they heard him say, "Excellent, excellent. O Shakyamuni Buddha! I am here to listen to your teaching of the Lotus Sutra." At that moment, when the 4 groups of people witnessed the Buddha who had entered parinirvana since immeasurable thousands of millions of billions of kalpas ago extol in such a manner, they were marveled at the unprecedented scene. Subsequently, they took clusters of precious jeweled flowers and showered them all over Abundant Treasures Buddha and Shakyamuni Buddha. Meanwhile, Abundant Treasures Buddha offered half his seat in the Treasure Pagoda to Shakyamuni Buddha, saying, "O Shakyamuni Buddha, take a seat over here." At once, Shakyamuni Buddha entered the pagoda and seated himself in cross-legged position on half the seat. Thereafter, upon seeing the two Tathagatas seated cross-legged on the lion throne in the Treasure Pagoda, attendees of the Great Assembly reflected as such, so distant and high up are the Buddhas. If only the Tathagatas would allow us to join them in the air through their divine powers. Instantaneously, Shakyamuni Buddha lifted the members of the Great Assembly high up into the air using his divine powers. In a robust and sonorous voice, he asked the four groups of people, who is able to broadly expound the Lotus Sutra in this Saha world. Now is the perfect time to do so. Tathagata will enter nirvana soon, and the Buddha wishes to entrust the Lotus Sutra to someone who can propagate it for eternity. Thereupon, the Bhagavath, wishing to reiterate his meaning, proclaimed in stanzas. Summary Overview, Chapter 11, Sighting of the Treasure Pagoda, Section 3, Paragraphs 1 to 41. Shakyamuni Buddha speaks in poetic stanzas to summarize the appearance of the Treasure Pagoda. O Bhagavath, the Holy Lord, though having entered parinirvana, he dwells in the Treasure Pagoda. And yet he still comes all the way for the Dharma. Then the rest of you, shouldn't you strive even greater for the sake of the Dharma? This Buddha has entered parinirvana since innumerable kalpas ago. Yet, he still listens to the Dharma everywhere. Because of the rarity of the Dharma, that Buddha made a vow. After my parinirvana, wherever I am, I will listen to the Dharma forever. Also, my emanations, who are the immeasurable Buddhas, as numerous as the Ganges' sands, have come to hear the Dharma and witness Abundant Treasures Tathagata, who has long entered parinirvana. Multitudes of disciples, heavenly gods, humans, and dragons, forego their wonderful lands, so as to arrive here, for the purpose of giving offerings, to ensure the perpetuity of the Dharma, to provide sufficient seats for the Buddhas. I use my divine powers to relocate the immeasurable living beings, hence purifying the lands. The Buddhas, one by one, are seated beneath the jeweled trees. It is just like the lotus flowers, adorning the pure and pristine pool. The Buddhas, who are seated on the lion thrones, under the jeweled trees, radiate brilliant light that adorns the darkness of night, just like an enormous torch burning resplendently. Their bodies exude mesmerizing fragrance. Everywhere in the lands of the 10 directions, enveloped in the midst of the aroma, living beings are unable to restrain their immense bliss. It is just like a gust of great wind, blowing the branches of small trees. By using the expedient methods, I ensure the perpetuity of the Dharma. I declare to the Great Assembly, after my parinirvana, who is able to protect and uphold, read and preach the Lotus Sutra. Please come forward before the Buddha to declare your vow now. Although Abundant Treasures Buddha has entered parinirvana long ago, because of his great vow, he is able to roar like a lion. Abundant Treasures Tathagata, and I myself, as well as the emanated Buddhas gathering here, will definitely understand the intention. Children of the Buddhas, whoever is able to protect the Dharma, should make a profound vow to ensure the perpetuity of the Dharma. Those who are capable of protecting the Lotus Sutra are deemed to have given offerings to me and Abundant Treasures Buddha. Abundant Treasures Buddha, who dwells in the Treasure Pagoda, has always been traveling in the 10 directions. For the sake of the Lotus Sutra, he has also given offerings to all the emanated Buddhas. who gloriously adorn the worlds with splendid light. Those who are able to preach the Lotus Sutra will be able to see me. Abundant treasures Tathagata and the many emanated Buddhas. O virtuous men! Ponder this carefully. This is a formidable task, for which you are required to make a great vow. Even if you should preach the rest of the other sutras, as numerous as the Ganges' sands, this is not difficult. Even if you should take Mount Sumeru and hurl it to regions of immeasurable Buddha lands, this, too, is not difficult. Even if you should use the toe of your foot to shake the great thousand worlds and hurl them to other lands, this, too, is not difficult. Even if you should stand on top of Akanishta and expound immeasurable other sutras for the sake of all living beings, this, too, is not difficult. Yet after the parinirvana of the Buddha, in the age of evil, if you are able to expound the Lotus Sutra, this is indeed very difficult. If there is someone who holds the sky with both hands and walks around with it, this, too, is not difficult. Yet after my parinirvana, if there is someone who copies and embraces the Lotus Sutra, or leads others to copy the sutra, this is indeed very difficult. Even if you should take the great earth, put it on your toenail, and ascend to the Brahma heaven, this, too, is not difficult. Yet after the parinirvana of the Buddha, in the age of evil, if there is someone who reads the Lotus Sutra even for a while, this is indeed very difficult. At the end of the kalpa where the fire reigns, even if you should carry the hay and enter into the inferno without being burnt, this, too, is not difficult. Yet after my parinirvana, if there is someone who upholds and embraces the Lotus Sutra and shares it with one person, this is indeed very difficult. Even if you should embrace the treasury of the 84,000 doctrines and 12 divisions of the sutras, expound these sutras to others, and enable the listeners to gain 6 divine powers. Despite all these, this, too, is not difficult. Yet after my parinirvana, if there is someone who is able to accept the Lotus Sutra and ask about its meanings, this is indeed very difficult. Even if you should expound the various dharma and lead thousands of millions of billions of immeasurable living beings, as numerous as the Ganges' sands, to attain the stage of Arhat and gain 6 divine powers, despite all the benefits, this, too, is not difficult. Yet after my parinirvana, if there is someone who could embrace and uphold the Lotus Sutra, this is indeed very difficult. For the sake of the Buddha way, I have widely expounded the Lotus Sutra in immeasurable lands, from the beginning until now. Among all the sutras I have expounded, the Lotus Sutra is the first and foremost. If you are able to uphold the Lotus Sutra, it means you are able to uphold the body of a Buddha. O virtuous men! After my parinirvana, if there are people who could accept and embrace, read and recite the Lotus Sutra, come forward and make a vow. In front of the Buddha now, the Lotus Sutra is difficult to uphold. If there are people who are able to uphold even for a while, I will surely be delighted. So will the other Buddhas. People such as these will be praised by all Buddhas. They are known as people of valiance, people of diligence, people who truly uphold the Dharma, and people who carry out the ascetic practices. All these people will quickly attain the unsurpassed Buddha way in future lifetimes. If there are people who could read and embrace the Lotus Sutra, they are truly the children of the Buddha, who live in the pristine land of benevolence. After the parinirvana of the Buddha. If there are people who could perceive the meanings in the Lotus Sutra, they are the eyes of the worlds. For heavenly and human beings. In that fearful age, if there are people who could briefly teach the Lotus Sutra even for a moment, they deserve the worship and offerings of heavenly and human beings.